We Three Kings by J. M. Bullen. Chapter 4, 1:30 a.m. to 3:15 a.m. Due to the shock of the Robin Mantle episode and its aftermath, with the paramedics and police wrangling the frenzied man to the back of the ambulance, neither Cosmo nor Rafferty had fully taken in their new surroundings. As they peered out of one tall, cracked window pane to watch the ambulance and police finally leaving the scene, the men were only aware that a woman, who was in touching distance of either side of 30, had kindly opened the side door of a large, elegant house to let them in, that they were in a place that was the epitome of faded grandeur, and that there were other spectators in the room with them. With the Mantle madness having now exited with an escort, Cosmo and Rafferty finally inspected their surroundings. It took them only moments to guess, from the kindly woman's uniform of a navy tunic and the 4 elderly witnesses to the Robin Mantle show, that they were in a care home. The carer on the night shift had let them in, and those residents who were awake and alert were rather relishing the fuss and the to-do, as well as the fresh blood in their midst. Although the house was old and elegant, it was also neglected and unloved. The carpets were worn out and fraying, the furniture mismatched and patched together. The paintwork looked distressed, as if it had not been decorated in years, and stains bloomed across the ceiling like empty thought bubbles. Furthermore, only a token tattered attempt at Christmas had been attempted. An emaciated Christmas tree stood shedding needles in the centre of the window wall. The short string of lights decorating the branches were clearly powered by batteries which were in their death throes. A handful of crumpled paper stars drooped from the ceiling with felt tips scribbled on them, and half a dozen short lengths of different coloured tinsel had been pinned above doorways, resembling the raggedy trophies of a hunter of some camp, exotic species of large, bristly caterpillar. It was all too little for such a large room, too dim, too thin, too feeble. Only a single Christmas card stood on a sideboard. Whoever had decorated tried their best with what they were given, but there just wasn't the means to make this anything but a threadbare Christmas. As Cosmo and Rafferty expressed their thanks to the younger woman and turned to leave through the door, the carer forestalled them. No, you must warm up in here for a little while at least. Let me make you a hot drink, yes? She then turned on the television, switching to a channel broadcasting a church service from somewhere around the world. We only have tea or coffee, I'm afraid. We are poor hosts and do not have much, but you are welcome to a hot drink, or we might have enough milk for a hot chocolate. I have to keep some back for my friends tomorrow. On the word friends, her hand indicated the residents of the care home, and she whispered conspiratorially, As a Christmas Day treat, you understand. Cosmo looked to Rafferty, who answered for them. You've been very kind, but we have promises to keep. It is most bitter out there. Cruel British weather, the carer replied. All we can offer you is a hot drink to tackle the chill for a few minutes. Will you take this little gift from us at least? Unsure how he could refuse without appearing rude, Rafferty nodded. Thank you. May I be of assistance, Beauty? Asked a gaunt old lady who was dressed up to the nines with a fresh lavender rinse and a glint in her eye. The parties I threw in my youth were legendary. Everyone who was anyone was there. There was such a clamour for invitations, so I know how to entertain. Oh, do I know how to entertain? The elderly lady turned to examine Cosmo and Rafferty. It is so very nice to have visitors Christmas Day. The world seems to pass us by too often. I shall make them a cup of something. No, you will not, Lily. You know you are not permitted in the kitchen tonight, the carer called Beauty replied, scolding the older lady good-naturedly. You may sit down and watch the carol service, or you may go back to bed like the sensible residents. But I'm dressed in my best, Beauty, and we have gentlemen callers. It is very late, Lily. Are you not tired? All of you? How can you expect a visitor bearing gifts if you will not sleep? The old lady called Lily was insistent. Oh, Beauty, I can help. Let me help. We shall plan such things they never even dreamt of before. She does not need your help, woman. She just told you, rebuked a pinched old man with a flinty voice. He was sitting in a lumpy, uncomfortable chair, as if to spite himself. Beauty is playing out her Christmas facade in the kitchen, like we all don't know what's going on in there. Oh, do shut your wizened old rupture for a mouth, Shirley. A plump woman sat in front of the television and launched in. She pretended to have half an eye on the carol service, but, in reality, had more than half an eye on the newcomers. I swear you'd find fault in an angel. What is the rule about insults, Agatha? Asked Beauty. The lady called Agatha sighed. We must spice them with a compliment, she muttered the mantra. Shut your wizened old gob, Shirley, you sweetheart. Beauty frowned at Agatha and then turned to the pinched old man. I will see a smile from you, Mr. Shirley, before this Christmas day is over. Beauty wagged her finger at him. Do not ruin it for others now. Mr. Shirley muttered and sank further into his uncomfortable chair, as if he was sat smothering every smile that ever dared venture across his features. A moustached gentleman with a ruddy face approached Cosmo and Rafferty and shook their hands. The name's Shepherd. First name, not last. Don't know what my old folks were thinking. Is your pal with the red scarf always off his rocker? If he is, he'd be better off in here with the rest of the lunatics, declared Mr. Shirley. I consider that an insult, Mr. Shirley, Beauty admonished him. Mr. Shirley shook his head. He'd be better off in here with the rest of the delightful, charming, witty grave bait. Mr. Shirley really is in a vexatious mood this night, isn't he, Beauty? Declared Lily. How can one be so irksome at Christmas? The moustached man, who had introduced himself as Shepherd, ploughed on. I'll say this for your friend, he put on a show. Most excitement we've had around here for weeks, months maybe. Even got old Shirley off his chair, and you can declare that as an authentic Yuletide miracle. Hallelujah. Are you two carol singers? Asked the plump lady called Agatha. I do love carols. Simple's the way, not overly fussy like too many who do them nowadays. We've already sung our fill tonight, I'm afraid, replied Cosmo, trying to get some feeling to return to his backside by standing in front of the lone space heater that was valiantly putting up a fight against the encroaching cold in the spacious room. You couldn't coax another note out of me this Christmas. What's Christmas? Spat Shirley. What's Christmas but the bogus sweetener at the end of the year to try to make us forget we're another year frailer, another year forgotten, another year fading further towards death? What's Christmas but flowers on a grave, decoration for our demise? Make him stop, Beauty, cried Lily. He's hexing all the goodwill. Gloriously gloomy and gittish as usual, Shirley, old man, Shepherd joined in. When he has got something of a point, though. Age is an exceedingly vicious cow. I used to have a backside. Women used to admire my shapely arse. He held up the back of his cardigan to show them Exhibit A. Now where's my arse gone? Look at it now. It's gone all deflated. I want to know who let the air out of my arse. You need to keep your voices down, please, said the carer called Beauty. As others are asleep, we have Christmas celebrations tomorrow. We need to be hearty and awake, including you, Mr. Shirley. When our visitors leave, we will all be going to our beds. After reminding the gaunt lady called Lily that she was not to follow under any circumstance, Beauty led Cosmo and Rafferty through to the kitchen, then pulled the door to without fully closing it. Strewn across the kitchen table were a quantity of odd socks, some of them spilling out tangerines, chocolates, homemade cards and little gifts, many of these presents still in an unwrapped state. The hot drink is a kind offer, Rafferty began, but we don't want to trouble you, and we can see you're busy. We really do need to get moving soon. Why did you let us in? Interrupted Cosmo. We could be anyone. We could be escaped convicts on the run, for all you know. Oh, sir, you looked after your friend. I witnessed this. You did not abandon him. You cared for him. Sometimes it was harsh care, I admit. You didn't need to slap him so often. But you cared for him until you could care for him no more. I recognize this in myself. You're not bad men, and we have nothing to rob here. You could hurt us, yes, but why would you do this to strangers? You would have to be devils to do this to us strangers. We're not bad men, Cosmo agreed. And you have nothing to fear from us. Are you making the residents stockings? I am. I must. Beauty dropped her voice to a hush. They would be forgotten otherwise. They may not be children, but even Mr. Shirley's face will light up like a babe when he finds gifts awaiting him. It is priceless. Who paid for all these gifts? Asked Cosmo. Your employers? Beauty clearly found the question awkward and dropped the volume of her voice a notch further, as if in shame. I pay for them myself, sir. I cannot see my poor friends here forgotten even by their own families. These people, they work hard all their lives. They paid into their community. They kept it all going and made it last. They are the roots of this society, the unseen, silent, overlooked roots that allow new shoots to flourish and thrive. When you listen to their histories, you see this. In their own humble way, these people's life struggles were quietly heroic. Do not they deserve our thanks and dignity in their final years? Should they be discarded and disregarded? I'm sorry, I am preaching. Cosmo seemed so taken with Beauty, his admiration was beyond speech. And who gives you anything for Christmas? Asked Rafferty. Beauty smiled. Christmas is a time for giving, I was told. Beauty is content to bring some happiness to others, although it is not so very much. But you're forgotten too, pressed Rafferty. Perhaps it is for the best that Beauty is forgotten, she replied. No fuss. Why? The carer seemed embarrassed again and fussed over making the hot drinks. Beauty does not want the attention, sir. Beauty is happy in what she does. She just wishes she could help out her own family a little more. Won't you see them tomorrow, for Christmas? Asked Rafferty. No, sir. I would dearly love to see them, but that is not possible, and they are so very far away. I send them a little something, although it is not so very much. Beauty handed them a mug of black coffee each. Even though Rafferty was restless and twitchy, especially as the hospital was not far away, he permitted himself a few minutes of cradling the hot drink and sipping it before he would head out into the chill night again. The thought of what his wife was enduring, or that he might already be a father and had missed the birth, skulked on the edges of all his conscious thought. But he had been close to shivering with sustained exposure to the cold throughout the night, and the incident with Mansell had alarmed him considerably. The old become children again at Christmas, Beauty continued. They bicker and they squabble, but they also get overexcited and will not sleep. When does your shift end? Asked Rafferty, as Beauty went back to wrapping up presents for the many stockings in front of her. When it ends, she replied. But your shift can only be a set number of hours, though, said Rafferty. It's illegal for Beauty is happy to spend Christmas with her friends here. I have no one else in my home here. But you have strange customs. What are pigs in blankets, even? Rafferty was about to return to his previous point when Cosmo thwarted him, intentionally steamrolling over Rafferty's question with one of his own. So what have you got planned for them tomorrow? Cosmo asked. Oh, they will all have to dress in their best clothing. Lily already has. We will have breakfast first, all together. Nothing special for breakfast, but this cannot be helped. After they have all finished their breakfast, they may open their stockings. Then we will put on the Christmas music, and Agatha and Lily will lead us all in singing, most likely. I shall suggest party games, but Mr. Shirley will not play, most likely. Someone should be coming in to help me cook lunch. We will watch the Queen's speech. We will eat our Christmas lunch, Brussels sprouts included. And then we will argue over what films we will watch. Shepherd will insist that The Great Escape is a Christmas film, but I do not think that it is. I think this is similar to many British families at Christmas. I have heard, yes? Sounds perfection, Beauty, declared Cosmo. No, Lily, no peeking now, Beauty called out as Lily nosed her head around the kitchen door with a cooey. Cosmo and Rafferty manoeuvred their bodies in front of the table to obscure Lily's view of the unwrapped contents of the stockings. Beauty thanked them and led Lily away. Does this Beauty ever stop? Does she ever sleep? Asked Rafferty. Come on, Eastie, can't you see what she is? A poor woman far away from her family, sending money home, grafting for employees who don't give a toss about her working hours or working conditions because they know she won't dare kick up a fuss. Join the dots, East. This woman's a bloody angel. Mr. Shirley, Lily and the others have no clue just how lucky they are to have landed under Beauty's care. May I ask a favour, gentlemen? Beauty said on a return. I do not think I can keep Lily out of the kitchen for much longer, and I have yet to finish their gifts and stockings, as you see. Would you sit with my friends for 5 minutes, 10 minutes at most, until I am finished? Rafferty was on the point of raising an objection, but Cosmo's reply was an instant, of course. Leading Rafferty out into the living room by the arm, Cosmo pleaded in hushed tones. Please, Eastie. A few more minutes, and then short of a miracle and act of God, it's off to the maternity unit. You have my word. Grimacing, Rafferty offered no vocal response, but did not object either. The warmth in the room was a little too inviting for Rafferty, but he had stronger incentives to drive him back out into the cold night again. "Are you two doctors?" asked Agatha. "Is it about poor Mr. Timmins? He has been looking a little peaky of late. Hope we don't lose him on Christmas Day. If you're doctors, then you might be able to help me. I've been having such trouble with my waterworks lately." "I want to tell you a ghost story," Cosmo announced to the room. "Is it horrific?" asked Lily. "I shan't sleep tonight if it's horrific." "It's not horror, and there isn't a great deal of the night left to sleep through." "Once upon a Christmas Eve, long ago," Cosmo began, 4 members of the same family, 3 brothers and 1 sister, were travelling in a horse-drawn coach on icy paths deep within a forest. The moustached man called Shepherd appeared as if he was on the point of dozing, but perked up slightly at the tail. Even the fidgety Lily sat down, and Rafferty was almost convinced that Mr. Churley threw an interested glance in Cosmo's direction. The driver was having the devil's own job from keeping the coach on the straight and narrow, but it's Christmas Eve, and the driver was keen to get home to his family. Risks were taken. The horses were urged to go a little faster than safety would allow, but the hoarfrost had already cast its spikes on the pine needles and made brittle the crisp foliage. Now the frost turned its attention to glassing up the puddles. 2 carriage wheels found no traction on the ice. A horse slipped. The coach slewed across the road and plunged into the dark forest, then, crash, collided with a thicket of pine. Squealing of frightened horses, crunching, splintering, tearing sound, split lips, a tumble of bodies, dead arms and bruises. Eventually the 4 passengers emerged from the wreckage of the carriage, but the driver and the horses were nowhere to be found, and the passengers were still some distance away from their destination. "Were the horses safe? Were the horses well?" asked Lily. "They were. Freed by the impact and spooked at the crash, they had run off into the forest, and no doubt the driver had headed off to find them." Lily nodded, reassured, and Cosmo went on. Largely unhurt, but alone and with no help of rescue, the 3 brothers and sister found their way back to the road to begin to trudge their way onwards. 'Twas a bleak night, promising frost and snow. The wind was the huff and snort of the furious mountain god, hurling itself down the slopes and slicing through forest, field and man in the lowlands. Soon, brothers and sister were shivering. By chance, they came across a locked, abandoned shack, and peering through its windows, they spied several coats that might just save them from the worst of the wind. What were they to do? Cosmo waited, expecting some interaction, but Shepherd had finally succumbed to sleep. Eventually, Mr. Shirley piped up. "I should have taken the coats. They weren't doing any good in the shack, were they?" "And that's what they did," confirmed Cosmo. "They broke into that shack and they took those coats. One of the brothers, Leach, even took 2 coats. And then they continued their long, weary walk along the road." But Leach claimed they were not alone anymore. Whenever he glanced behind him, Leach caught sight of a dark figure following them, until he almost dared not look behind him anymore. There it stalked, always just on the edge of total darkness of the night. So he was left unsure whether his mind was playing tricks on him, or if the creature was truly there. A fearful Gorter. Sometimes Leach thought he heard its footsteps, but it might just have been the fierce wind playing about his ears. Now Leach felt a different sort of chill. Cosmo continued in softer, more monotonous tones. After a little while, the 4 emerged out of the forest to be greeted by the sight of a village. It was Christmas Eve, goodwill to all men, and the people of the town had their doors thrown open, offering drinks and food to all and sundry, even the strangers. It was a good time, a happy place. Cosmo dropped the tone of his voice to a low, calming register and continued the tale at a more dawdling pace. The brothers and sister warmed themselves by an open fire, and they helped themselves to the hot mulled cider, and the toasty pies, and the stews, and the brews, and the sweet treats that were passed around. As ever, Leach helped himself to more mulled cider, more pies, more of everything than he was ever going to need. All thought of the stalking Gorter gone, Leach considered the people of the town to be fools in their big-heartedness, and he took. But the others were more moderate, and were content to feel the coziness of the fire bathe their limbs, and experience the warmth of the cider and the pies and the brews and the stews saturate their bodies with the heat spreading out from their core. And they enjoyed the murmur of laughter, and the friendliness of the village folk, and their rowdy attempts at song, and the fire crackling, and a dancing glow from its flames, and the warmth, the glorious, glowing warmth. At first, Rafferty was confused as to why Cosmo had stopped his story so inconclusively. When he peered around at the audience, however, it was clear that every one of the residents in the care home was finally asleep. Stood in the doorway to the kitchen, Beauty smiled and whispered a "thank you" as she began to drape blankets over the sleeping figures of her elderly friends. Cosmo was clearly torn about leaving Beauty, but he nodded at Rafferty, and in silence, the two prisoners edged their way out the side door and into the street. The wind had abated considerably when Cosmo and Rafferty left the Yew Grove nursing home and returned to the streets. High up ahead and in the tall building in front of them, the light still winked its listless SOS, on and off, on and off, on and off, although Cosmo reckoned it was slowing down. Rafferty barely dared to glance at it, for fear the message somehow augured some critical circumstance about his wife and the labour she was going through. This richer district of the city was almost entirely inert and dark, but for the lights of one lavish building which, alone, blazed fiercely like some ocean liner mid-passage. Loafing beneath the portico of this most opulent of buildings were four men dressed in white ties and tails, swilling brandy from fat glasses and smoking stout cigars. With nothing else to rouse their interest so late into the night, the sudden presence of Cosmo and Rafferty striding past instantly drew the men's attention. Yes, he's perfect," declared a slick, broad-shouldered man with streaks of grey in his otherwise immaculate dark hair. His three fellows were three sheets to the wind, but the sleek man could hold his drink better than they, and the confidence he possessed was of a type ingrained within his breeding, not just born of the booze. "Oi, you two!" The slick man emitted a sharp whistle, causing Cosmo and Rafferty to stop directly outside the property. "You're just the ticket, big fella," the slick man declared. His companions let out bemused chuckles. "How would you like to earn some money as a poor Santa, bringing joy to the deserving by dishing out presents to the girls? You're up for that, aren't you? Happy to be our shabby Santa, aren't you?" The other men in tails snorted and guffawed with amusement in the manner of people who are in on a joke. "We're having a bit of a wassail here tonight, and what we need, though I don't think we knew it until now, did we, gents? What we absolutely and undeniably need is some sap dressed in a rubbish outfit to play shabby Santa, skint Santa, a raggedy, broke, frayed Father Christmas. I love it, and will brook no alternatives. The girls will find it hysterical, won't they? You want to earn some dosh, don't you? You want to bring joy and wonder to the deserving, don't you? Of course you do." Rafferty started. "We're not. How much?" asked Cosmo, not allowing his fellow inmate to finish. The slick man with the silver streaks in his hair beamed a smug, plump grin, knowing the fish was on the end of the line and just needed reeling in. "It's more of a whim," he declared in a blasé fashion. "We don't really need you, you understand. And it's a buyer's market. And we don't need the hassle. Find yourself another sap," Cosmo returned, and spun on his heel to walk away. "Well played." The slick, silver-haired man gave Cosmo a slow hand clap, then took out his wallet and produced a £50 note. "I always find the world is better lubricated and calibrated if one throws money at a problem." Flinging the note away as if it was a playing card, the £50 drifted down lazily toward Cosmo's feet. Cosmo did not even deign to glance at it, let alone stoop to pick it up. 100, Cosmo demanded, and he made a show of looking up and down the empty street. "Supply and demand. Call it market forces at work." The slick, silver-haired man smirked, his shoulders heaving with chuckles as he removed a few more notes of a lower denomination and let them flutter to the ground like lavish, oversized confetti. "And 50 for Santa's little helper here," Cosmo added, nodding at Rafferty. The group of men guffawed and grinned at each other. "Hey, Tobin, wait until the guys at the club hear that you've been out negotiating about a couple of down-and-outs," one of the other white tie and tails taunted. "Anyway, isn't Santa traditionally dressed in red?" The traditional dress is green, you moron, the sleek man replied. Cosmo was sobering him up nicely. No, I've got this, Tobin. A younger, blonde-haired tailsuit intervened. You've got to admire the sheer nerve of our skint Santa here. I applaud it. The man dropped another £50 onto the street in front of Cosmo and Rafferty, where it threatened to skitter away in the wind, along with the other notes. Cosmo's stare never left the slick, silver-haired man's own eyes. Eastie, don't you touch 'em. The notes. So what is it you want us to do? You can have the extra 50. He hustled for it. But we don't need him. Just you. The sleek man nodded at Rafferty. He waits outside. The slick, silver-haired man prowled forward until he was stood directly in front of Cosmo Shanks, almost as if he was confronting him, challenging him. Whereas you, old fella, are to wait in that room there. Without looking at it, the silver-haired dinner suit called Tobin pointed to a darkened front room, only illuminated by glowing Christmas lights. On my signal, you are to bring in everyone's gifts and distribute them. Girls first, all jolly like, the ghost of Christmas present, that sort of thing. Shouldn't take more than half an hour. Think you can manage that? Is that within your range? Rafferty was about to make a complaint about the timings and his need for urgency, but Cosmo stopped him by grabbing his sleeve. Think we can give it our best? Eastie grabbed the notes. He gave Rafferty a telling look. And don't go far. The other suits chinked glasses, finding the very notion of a shabby Santa their brand of droll. But the slick, silver-haired man moved even closer to Cosmo, toe-to-toe. Good job you caught me after we got to the port. I negotiate for a living, old fella. I would have gutted you, bled you dry, and hung you up to go gamey in any normal deal. Cosmo appeared unfazed. It's a seller's market, son. Back to school. Something nasty flashed behind the eyes of the slick, silver-haired man called Tobin, but he soon laughed it off along with the others. Another couple of men in white tie and tails emerged, and the situation was ineptly explained to them until Tobin took control. I'm calling it Operation Secret Santa, so listen up. With plenty of shushes and clumsy, sloshed surreptitiousness, Cosmo was led inside the hallway of the well-appointed house and immediately installed in a side room. Inside was a lavishly decorated Christmas tree and a mound of parcels which had been professionally packaged in gender-coded wrapping paper. There was even a sack. In the room next door rang the sounds of gratification, laughter, appetites met, unruffled contentment. You're going to have to wait here about 10, 15, 20 minutes, the sleek silver-haired man said. But you've been paid well enough, haven't you? Shh! Keep your voice down or the girls will hear you, fussed one of the other suits. We want lots of ho-ho-hos and joy to the world, added the younger blonde-haired suit. But no putting the girls on your knee, warned a third suit, and no dodgy double entendres. Operation Secret Santa, a man sniggered with laughter. Cosmo smiled indulgently. So, this is how it will go down, old fella. We'll head back into dinner, and you don't make a peep until you hear me announce, "Can anyone hear a stranger in the house?" You make some stomping noises and all that palaver, like it's a Christmas ghost story come to life. And then, when they're good and thrilled, make a grand entrance, right? Throw open that door, boom, a Merry Christmas, dole out the presents from the sack. They're all labelled, just call out their names. Give it all largesse and largeness. Once done, make yourself scarce, you with me? The white ties and tails left with one of them touching his nose and repeating, Operation Secret Santa. Outside, Rafferty was twitchy and fretfully pacing the pavement when suddenly one of the windows in the darkened front room of the house shot open. Cosmo hissed for help as he bundled out the sack now bulging with presents and various Christmas decorations. In a state of shock, Rafferty reached out to place a fallen present back in the sack. No, don't touch him, Cosmo warned. The theft is mine, East. You ought to have no hand in it. As he leant on Rafferty's shoulder to guide him safely down to the ground, Cosmo could not help but notice the younger man's dismayed expression. Oh, come on, East. It's not like I'm going to profit by these. But we're going to give Beauty and the residents of the Yew Grove nursing home a better Christmas than they were expecting. That we can do. We don't even know what are in these gifts, returned Rafferty. Makes it more of a surprise, then. I love an unexpected Christmas gift, declared Cosmo. He licked the wrapping of the fallen present before ripping off the labels. Tastes expensive. Let's go. When Beauty opened the side door of the Yew Grove care home to their knocking, her exhaustion quickly gave way to astonishment when Cosmo scattered the contents of the sack onto the floor around the emaciated Christmas tree. Fortunately, all the residents of the care home, including Lily and Mr. Shirley, had retired to their beds or were dozing in chairs. Cosmo presented Beauty with 2 long strings of Christmas lights and a whole heap of tinsel he had stripped from the white tie and tails joint. But where can you have got all this? Asked Beauty. From people who did not deserve them, Cosmo replied. I'd stay to help decorate, but Easty's been some way beyond patient. We have to go. Did you steal these? I cannot take them if they are stolen. They must be stolen. I was tasked to bring joy to the deserving, and I'm fulfilling that task, said Cosmo, fattening up the skinny tree with several loops of new Christmas lights. I was invited into their house. They could mock a man far poorer than themselves. Those people had no true spirit of charity or giving. Besides, they're all on my naughty list. You won't get in trouble, Beauty. No one will ever know. We have to go in a minute, and we are leaving all these gifts here. You decide if you want to refuse them, but we're not taking them back. Beauty stood by the door, looking bewildered. Wordlessly, she appealed to Rafferty, who just shrugged a non-committal response. Beauty, please let us do this for you, Cosmo asked as he took her hands in his. Easty, give us the cash. I also want you to accept this, he added, handing Beauty the £150 he had been offered as payment. I cannot accept stolen. They paid me to bring joy to the deserving. I don't know if this counts as joy, but it's the best I can do, and there is no one more deserving. I've nothing else to give, Beauty. Let me give you this. Send it home to your folks. Cosmo planted a kiss on her forehead. Merry Christmas. Beauty looked as if she was caught between tears and putting up resistance. Any decision about either refusing or accepting the gifts was removed from her volition, however, because Cosmo and Rafferty were already out of the door of the Yew Grove care home, dashing up the street and past the opulent house belonging to Tobin and his suits. When a cry went up. Cosmo and Rafferty had been spotted. Fortunately for the escaped men, they had a head start on the white ties and tails, and many of their pursuers had almost as much wobbly lateral movement as forward. Unfortunately for Cosmo and Rafferty, the white ties and tails greatly outnumbered them, and no establishment was open. Other than risking garden bushes and bins, there was nowhere to hide. Rafferty in particular was aware of how out of hand a confrontation with seriously drunk men might become when their tolerance levels to what was acceptable, or for enough being enough, had corroded into something a little more elastic. Rafferty might find himself going to hospital that night after all, but not to the maternity unit. It seemed that the whole city was asleep and indifferent to their plight. The whole city, it seemed, but for the wilting torchlight still blinking out a very lethargic SOS. It was not much of a hope, but a beacon of frail promise, a chance, something to aim for nonetheless, and the chasing footsteps and cries from the suits seemed to be making inroads into their lead. Reaching the foot of the tall building from which the torchlight was flashing, Cosmo and Rafferty now had to negotiate the barrier of the external security door. Picking one of the 2 call buttons on the top floor, they hoped the child with the torch might at least buzz them in through the security door, where they would wait until the white ties and tails threat had passed. It was not a child who answered the buzzer, though, but a woman who sounded as if she had been roused from slumber. Who is this? The voice was as slow and lazy as the torchlight flashes. We saw your light, and we have a We'll see, the voice replied enigmatically. Cosmo did not get any further with his explanation, as a moment later the buzzer sounded to let them through the outer security door. More than faintly astonished that access into the building was this easy, Cosmo and Rafferty took only a microsecond to glance at each other before the voices of the white tie and tails prowling dangerously close nearby sent them barging through the door, up the stairs onto the first floor, beyond the sight or reach of any predatory suits. It was so still and so deep into the night that even from the first floor landing, Cosmo and Rafferty heard muffled voices of hissed anger soon give way to moans of complaint about the chill. Not one of the white tie and tails had witnessed them entering the building. The trail had gone as cold as the conditions. It was only Tobin's barked orders of rage and frustration that stirred the suits to keep searching for their quarry. Whoever the woman was who had buzzed them in, Cosmo and Rafferty wanted to thank her for saving them. even though they were both aware that two men appearing at her door in the early hours of the morning might be somewhat south of alarming. Taking the lift to the top floor, it was obvious which flat belonged to the woman because the door had been left wide open. However, the two men still announced their presence with a gentle knock. "Come in." The woman's drowsy voice greeted them from inside the flat. The tone had a disorientated quality to it, and she was clearly heedless to her own safety with strangers. Other than a handful of stubby candles guttering in shot glasses and a couple of strings of pale LED illuminations, the lights were off. Yet the two men could just make out the figure of the woman returning to a window of the small flat, where she slumped down upon a couch and switched on the torch again, the batteries weak and dying, and now glowing with a feeble flicker. "We just wanted to say thank you. Your friends are still looking for you, you know, the posh penguins. I'd stay in here till they're gone." "What are you two, vampires waiting for an invitation? You can come inside." She waited for the two men to take a couple of sheepish steps beyond the threshold and then stop, standing stiffly. "I didn't think anyone would actually see my light." "Well, we did, and we're grateful. You saved us," Cosmo replied. "Aren't you afraid we might rob you, or worse?" asked Rafferty. The woman's head swayed slightly as she turned to gaze at them. Her tiredness was not surprising given the hour, but then there did not seem any point to her self-imposed lighthousing with the torchlight. "Wouldn't matter about being robbed. Help yourself. I'd rather not be violated or die painfully, though." "We won't harm you." Cosmo held out his hands to signal peaceful intent. "Wouldn't a pair of serial killers say the same thing? And use the same gesture?" she teased languidly. Cosmo dropped his hands to his side. The torch had all but given up the ghost, so she allowed the device to slip from her hands and let it lie almost inert on her lap, the light slowly dying. "Are you waiting for someone?" asked Cosmo. "No, I'm just waiting. I didn't think anyone would actually see my signal," she replied. "Any reason for the signalling?" asked Cosmo. "Just wanted to see who was out there." She smiled lazily. "Wanted to see if I was alone. But you're here, so I'm not alone." "We're going to have to make a move in a minute, though," Rafferty replied. "You've been kind and we're so grateful, but I have to get to the hospital." "Someone poorly?" she asked. "No, my wife is about to give birth to our first. At least, I hope she's about to give birth and I haven't missed it." "New life," she nodded to herself. "That seems fitting." "Fitting?" The woman smiled vacantly and seemed to ponder the answer. "Christmas is a birthday, after all." "I'm Cosmo, this is Rafferty. You spending Christmas on your own?" The pause was an invitation for the woman to offer up her own name. "Rebecca, I am. Lost my mother 6 months ago. Not unexpected, but still. Our family dog Gracie 2 months before that. Bad year." "I'm sorry," said Cosmo. "Your father still—" But Rebecca forestalled any inquiries in that direction with a shake of the head. In the lull in conversation, Rafferty took the opportunity to step out onto the tiny balcony to spectate on the movements of the white tie and tails below. After an ache of silence, Rebecca asked, "Do you think most people are good, Cosmo?" The non sequitur threw Cosmo shanks for a moment. I'm probably the wrong person to ask on that score, Rebecca. The company I normally keep is probably not the best." "Are you a bad man?" asked Rebecca. "Should I be worried?" "You have nothing to fear from us," Cosmo replied, repeating what he thought he had said to Beauty less than an hour ago. "I think, on balance, most people are fairly good, yes. They try to be." "I think most people are detached from all that," Rebecca declared. In the dim light, her complexion was the colour of pale ash smothering a dying fire. "We're minor roles, bit parts, if that, in most other people's lives. A handful of inconsequential entrances and exits. So what if the third crew member exits stage right and doesn't reappear? Social furniture needs a bit of rearranging is all. But it's family where we count. Not all of us, Cosmo muttered to himself. Rebecca was not heeding him, however, and seemed lost in her own reverie. Family are our anchors. Without them, we drift and sink. Not for all families. Choppy waters and wrecks for some families. Plenty of submerged hazards too. True. But that's what Christmas time is, I think. Home to familiar waters you can navigate. A safe harbour. I wouldn't really know, because without Mum, Cosmo, I'm lost. Rebecca added and turned her gaze to the window. Rebecca made not a sound to indicate any emotion. The silence was suffocating. Unsure whether any contact was appropriate, Cosmo stepped forward hesitantly and eventually opted to squat down beside Rebecca to take her pale hand in his. Outside, on the tiny balcony, Rafferty was spectating on the progress of the white tie and tails below. A sapping cocktail of vintage liquor and lethargy was a twist of chilliness were taking their toll on these privileged men and meant there was very little running around now. The ones he could see paced around aimlessly, adopting disconsolate postures, knowing that their quarry had gone to ground. In the darkness their suits appeared like a want of light, the white of their shirts like downward-pointing arrows reflecting their spirits. Even Tobin's strident cajoling was having little effect on his subordinates who were tiring. Most of them began to head back to their wives and girlfriends, writing off the evening as a loss. These were men accustomed to spinning myths about themselves. Maybe they would turn to their wives the tales of Olympian daring do, of confronting an army of beggars and vagrants, barely making it out of the fray with their lives, of hunting down the thieves and choosing clemency and compassion. It was Christmas, after all. Gazing down the street in the opposite direction, Rafferty finally saw his prize. The hospital was barely a quarter of a mile away. When Rafferty abandoned the balcony of the flat, he found Cosmo draping a blanket over the drowsy woman. Glancing up at Rafferty, Cosmo gave a bemused gurn over how rapidly the woman had dozed off, but it was late at night after all. Something seemed off-kilter to Rafferty. It had from the moment Rebecca had spoken to them over the intercom. What was she doing up so late at night, signalling to no one in particular with her torch? Why did she seem indifferent to the potential threat of the presence of two strangers? If she was so tired, why did she remain awake? Scanning the flat, a couple of small, pale shapes caught Rafferty's eye over in the dim kitchen area, and as he wandered over, they soon resolved into two empty pill bottles lying discarded on a dark counter. "She's not sleeping, Cosmo. She's overdosing." Instantly raising the slouching woman, Cosmo forced open her mouth and stuck his fingers down her throat, holding Rebecca's head steady as she vomited up the contents of her stomach. "Call an ambulance." "Be quicker to take her to the hospital ourselves. I know you've a baby coming, East, but you have to think what's best. The hospital's a few hundred yards down the road, Cosmo. It will be quicker to walk. We've already had 2 ambulances out early because of us and our entourage. The paramedics are busy enough as it is. We walk her there." Rafferty took charge, grabbing the empty pill bottles and shoving them in Cosmo's dressing gown pockets. "Besides, keep her moving and active. Might help. The cold outside might revive her a bit too." Cosmo could see the sense in what Rafferty was saying. Dressing Rebecca's ragdoll body in a jacket they found on the back of her door, the three of them rode the lift to the bottom floor, with Cosmo talking to Rebecca the entire time, even though she only offered inarticulate murmurs in return. Unheeding of the threat of the remaining white tie and tails now, the two prisoners half walked, half carried the woman between them. After barely 100 yards, though, Rebecca was completely unresponsive, and Cosmo took it upon himself to carry her in his arms for the last stretch to the hospital. "Do you need me to come with you?" asked Rafferty. "No, Eastie, this was your goal, and this is where we part," Cosmo uttered as he staggered towards accident and emergency. "It's been both bitter and a blast, son. Best of luck." And with that, Rafferty rushed off, following the signs to the maternity unit, with the hope of joining his wife in time for the birth of their child.